Good evening and welcome to the joint meeting of the City of Salem Budget Committee and the Salem Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee for Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. Would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Here.
Member Cohen.
Present.
Member Allen.
Here.
Member Tigan.
Here.
Member Vera Brandel.
Here.
Member Nishioka.
Here.
Member Phillips.
Here.
Member Gwen.
Here.
Member Gonzalez.
Here.
Member Julie Hoy.
Here.
Member Nordyke.
Here.
Member Varney.
Here.
Member Chris Hoy.
Here.
Member Dixon.
Here.
Member Curtis.
Here.
Member Chirac.
Here.
Vice Chair Brown.
Present.
Chair Stapleton.
I'm here. Thank you so much. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you so much. Vice Chair Brown, do we have any additions or deletions?
Yes, Madam Chair. We do have some additions tonight, and I move for the approval of the additions agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Brown, seconded by Phillips. And what is our addition tonight? Looks like an information report.
Information report.
Great. Is there any discussion at all? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Here.
Member Cohen.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Nordyke. Aye. Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Chirac.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Chair Stapleton.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you so much. Vice Chair Brown, the minutes.
Yes, Madam Chair, I move for the...
Sorry. I skipped right over item 2. That was my fault. I apologize. I'm just ready to get stuff done tonight. All right, we have public testimony. We have 2 people signed up. First off is Rick Guapo. Did I say it right? No? Gapo? I apologize. If you could state your name and your ward or address, and you have 3 minutes. Thanks for coming down.
Great. I'm Rick Gapo, Ward 1, and at 1299 21st Street. I am here, first, I can never come not be here and just thank the city and thank the council for the support that Marion Polk Food Share receives. I'm the president of Marion Polk Food Share. We receive support to purchase food that goes out to our community members. We receive support for Meals on Wheels, which is literally feeding 1,000 seniors a day right now. And we receive support for the youth farm, where we have a 7-acre farm and the kids think they're growing food and we think we're growing kids. So thank you for all of that. You should also know that right now, the numbers of people being served, the number of people coming to our local food pantries is super high. It is last month, March, was the highest numbers we've ever seen. To give some context, pre-COVID, we had about 11,000 visits a month to pantries. The height of COVID was 17,000 visits. There's a number of individuals coming to a pantry to go bring food back to their family. So that's not 17,000 that's 17,000 families. It's not 17,000 people. And then last month, it was 18,000. So I just want to stress that the need is super high. And one of the ways I think the city supports that need is supporting the budget being thought about today. And I want to say I'm here in support of the recommended budget. I think the city having funds to serve the community is crucial, is important, and that the city should be able to be funded to support these social services. And I would say I know this isn't on today's issue, but I also support the upcoming conversation about payroll tax, because I think having a budget that the city can stand behind for its community services is super important. That's all I had.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, DJ Vincent. Again, state your name and your ward, and you have 3 minutes.
DJ Vincent, pastor director of Church of the Park. I live in Ward 3. It's an honor to be sharing with you tonight in person. Many times I've been on the Zoom square, and I'm here to speak in support of increasing revenue. When you do a pilot project like we did to begin serving our unsheltered neighbors, that was one-time dollars. And we put projects on the ground, and you as counselors and the city, you were innovative in what we put on the ground. And you also asked for evaluation. What are the outcomes? And so Church of the Park actually submits a report to the city every month on how every dollar was spent and the number of people being impacted. And so to give you a little bit of a picture, last year in 2022, we were able to, in those non-congregant micro shelters, help 592 people have a safe, supported place to be where they were meeting with a case manager and moving towards permanent housing. 271 of those folks did move to a positive destination. And we are incredibly encouraged about that. That 64% of the folks served moved out of homelessness. And that sounds good. And yet when we did the point in time count this January, which again is like the low water mark for how many unsheltered are in our community, that point in time count was still up from the previous year at over 1,500 people. So even though we had impacted that many folks through this pilot project, there are still more to serve. And so that can't remain as a pilot project. We have a family shelter site that serves up to 132 people a night, usually 40 family units. We have 80 beds across from Safeway on Center Street that are serving people each night, and we're about to open 38 more beds on Turner Road for young adults, 18 to 24. Those projects that are seeing more than half of those folks move out of homelessness, they need increased revenue or they will go away. So thank you for your consideration of increasing revenue in this budget proposal.
Thank you. Yes, Member Nordyke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, for Rick Galpo, who already sat down, I just want to remind folks that food security is homeless prevention, because a lot of folks will have to choose between paying for food for their families and paying for rent. So our work that we provide here helps prevent homelessness with the partnership of the Marion Polk Food Share. As a Church of the Park, you folks do incredible work for reducing homelessness one person at a time. Can you give a recent example of the workforce development options that you provide to the folks who come to your shelters?
Yeah, we believe that folks who maybe are coming for food or shelter, we want to move them to the other side of the table as soon as possible as volunteers. Then we start doing trainings and bring temp agencies on site so they can get actual employment. Our commitment is that at least half of the folks that we employ would be impacted by homelessness. And at the young adult site, we're building workforce development opportunities from the very beginning. There's going to be a training kitchen on site, so hopefully we're preparing people to have more skills to go out into the workforce.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, Member Phillips.
Thank you, DJ, for coming down. Trevor Phillips, Councilor Ward 3. So you mentioned some of the numbers there. I think for the point in time count, you said there's about 1,500 people in our community this January that were unsheltered. To kind of try to make an apples to apples comparison, what do you estimate? I don't expect you to have precise numbers, but roughly estimate it would have been if we did not fund the micro shelter communities that we currently have.
Well, you could easily add 275 more folks to that, and then add 200 folks that we shelter each night. So you're up to about 500 more folks that would have been in that count if, again, the city hadn't invested in this partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, one more here, or maybe more.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Pastor Vincent, so you referenced earlier that 271 people moved to a positive destination. Can you share with us, please, what is a positive destination?
Thank you so much. So 25% of those is HUD level permanent housing, and many times we'll work with the Salem Housing Authority on bridge housing if they know someone has a voucher and we're just looking for a spot. Other times a positive destination for us is they're going into a transitional housing program that suits their needs, and then permanent supportive housing, like some of the projects the city has stood up in the past few years.
Okay. Just two follow-up questions. So, and this may sound kind of complex, but hopefully it isn't. So you're keeping numbers and you're keeping track of how many people you serve, right? Do you partner with other churches too in Salem, or just your church?
Very good. So we started in 2007 as a collaborative of helping the church community meet the needs of unsheltered folks. Right now we have 20 different churches that serve every month in some capacity and partner with us. We have 6 churches right now that park people in their parking lots overnight, and then those folks can come to one of our sites and get case management, access to showers and laundry during the day.
Got it. Okay. And one final question. So we all know that one of the governor's top priorities is the unsheltered population and those individuals that are just struggling to, maintain a mortgage. When you think about the work that you're doing and the work that your congregation is doing, and we include mental health also, can you kind of share with us, what does mental health look like when you're trying to treat and take care of these families who need a roof over their head? Can you kind of layer that for us? Because I know that it's a layered question, because when you drive down our streets or any of the corners or underneath the bridges, you'll see a variety of people, different demographics. And sometimes we just like to lump everybody together. And so as you think about that question, I would like you to also include, what does it look like when you're trying to serve those individuals that are part of the LGBTQIA plus community?
Very good. So we I'll start with the last question. We are very encouraged about being an inclusive community, and over 10% of our workforce identifies with that community, so that almost on every shift, those who are in the unsheltered community coming as guests see someone who represents them in leadership and with staff. And then coming around your question of mental health, so we have a partnership with both the county and JD Health and Wellness, so that 3 days a week, 2 of our shelters are designated as offices for counseling, behavioral health, and even primary health appointments. And our goal there is to connect people to long-term behavioral health and primary care resources, so that when they leave our site, they've already got the relationship established.
Thanks, Pastor Benson. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and I'll just use this opportunity to put the plug out there for more parking locations for our Safe Park, that we are in dire need of that, and I would love to see even more of our community partners step up and help with that. We do have another question online, Member Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Stapleton. And, I don't know if DJ is still at the podium. Since
Yes.
I want to take advantage of him being there, one of the things I've noticed from being on council is, issues have to rise to the top to really be addressed, because there's so much need out there. And that makes us behind. We're behind. We're always a little behind. At first it was mostly men on the street, then it's 30-40% women. I mean, it's just, and now we're seeing a lot of young people out there. What's the near future like? What are we not, what hasn't risen to the top yet that could be a trend we need to jump on? Maybe now start thinking about it. DJ, anything that comes to mind?
I just want to restate the fact that you're hitting the point that we saw over 100 18 to 24-year-olds getting served by us in a general way, and they need specific supports and specific encouragement around workforce development. The fact that you named, we have a startling number of women in our community who are unsheltered at mind-blowing percentages, and so we can't invest enough in that area, and we're seeking to do so as a community. And then we have an unreasonable amount of families experiencing homelessness, and that is why even with this new state funding, we asked for improvements to the family site beyond where it was at.
Thank you. Yes, I'm always, all of these numbers are really hard to take in, of course, but I want to touch on the senior citizens in our community that are homeless or are experiencing homelessness. It's so hard for me to see. That one hits me particularly hard as well. And I know that also is a growing number. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it was asked early on in this project how many of the folks are 55 plus, and that number on our wait list is still in close to 100 folks that, again, need served, who are 55 plus, who need to have our attention. The other area that we're looking at is folks who qualify for senior and disability services who are just waiting in sheltering, who need long-term care. And so that is an area we need to continue to invest in when we talk about building permanent housing.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. All right. Now, Vice Chair Brown, the minutes.
Yes, Madam Chair. I move to approve the minutes of May the 3rd, 2023 meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Vice Chair Brown and seconded by Phillips. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton?
I'd like to officially do this right. Aye.
You scared me. Member Cohen?
Aye.
Member Allen?
Aye.
Member Tigan?
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel?
Aye.
Member Nishioka? Aye. Member Phillips?
It's happened to all of us before. Don't worry about it. Aye.
Member Gwen? Aye. Member Gonzalez?
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy?
Aye.
Member Nordyke? Aye. Member Varney?
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy?
Aye.
Member Dixon?
Aye.
Member Curtis?
Aye.
Member Chirac? Aye. Vice Chair Brown?
Aye.
Chair Stapleton?
Aye, motion passes. Thank you so much. All right, now on to action items. We have an errata. Vice Chair Brown, do we have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move to approve the errata 6. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, they're tag teaming this. We got a second by Phillips. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton?
Aye.
Member Cohen?
Aye.
Member Allen? Member Tigan?
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel?
Aye.
Member Nishioka? Aye. Member Phillips?
Aye.
Member Gwen? Aye. Member Gonzalez?
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy?
Aye.
Member Nordyke?
Aye.
Member Varney?
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy?
Aye.
Member Dixon?
Aye.
Member Curtis?
Aye.
Member Chirac? Aye. Vice Chair Brown?
Aye.
Chair Stapleton?
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is information items. We have 2 staff reports. Are there any questions for staff? Yes, Member Allen.
I should have asked this before I said aye to errata 6. When is the appropriate time to ask questions about errata 6?
Well, we can ask them now.
There's Josh.
Probably before we approved it, but go ahead.
I don't think it would change my vote.
Okay, understood.
I do have a question on errata 6. First of all, Josh, thanks for reaching out and providing some good answers, and apologize that the second shoe didn't fall in my mind until later. So I'm on page 10 of the errata. In our conversation, my understanding of the interfund transfer was to pay for the additional staff cost associated with running the medic units. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
The additional costs for that staffing, though, was not reflected in any increase or change in general fund expenses.
That is correct. We anticipate the current fire department appropriation to be sufficient to cover that expense, but if not, then we'll be coming back to council with an amendment during the year when we get to that point.
Okay. If the current appropriation is sufficient, then it wouldn't be an issue. My thought process on that was that as we discussed, the interfund transfer was only going to be sufficient to cover the additional cost for the medic staffing. And if that's the case, then that interfund transfer isn't new revenue. Therefore, the change of revenue in the fire safety permits really should create a decrease in the fund balance. Is that true?
That is true, yes.
Okay, but because of the potentiality of being able to cover the additional expense in the appropriation, we didn't make the change, or you didn't make the change. I'm sorry, I'm not making anything.
Correct, yes, that was my call. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on the information reports? Seeing none, thank you, Josh. We have no public hearings, but we do have a lot of special orders of business. I'm going to hand it over to Josh to do a summary of what we should look forward to tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. Just real quick, what we're going to be covering this evening, or hoping to cover this evening. First up will be the Urban Renewal Agency property tax levy, followed by the Urban Renewal Agency budget recommendation, then the city property tax levy, and then the city budget recommendation. I just want to lay that out, so if you happen to have modifications or things you're thinking about for discussion for where they should land, we're going to take care of the URA first, and then in the budget recommendation, we'll be walking through each results area, starting with good governance. So if you do have a motion, feel free to ask, or if you have a point of discussion, feel free to ask early on so we make sure we capture it before we adopt that area.
Great, thank you. All right, if there's no questions on the format for tonight, Josh, would you like to talk to us about the property taxes for the Salem Urban Renewal Agency?
Yes, please. The first special order of business this evening is the approval of the Salem Urban Renewal Agency property tax levy. Oregon local budget law requires the budget committee separately specify the ad valorem property taxes for the Urban Renewal Agency and the city of Salem. Staff recommends that the budget committee approve the Salem Urban Renewal Agency estimated ad valorem property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff? Seeing none, Vice Chair Brown, do we have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move with approval of the Salem Urban Renewal Agency 2024 ad valorem property taxes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ooh, I'm
With a
going to give that
tie.
one to Nordike.
It's a tie.
Thank you. All right. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Aye.
Member Cohen.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Nordike.
Aye.
Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Chirac.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Chair Stapleton.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. All right, Josh, next up on the list is the Salem Urban Renewal Agency budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you might remember, the URA budget was discussed with the committee at its April 26th meeting. The URA has a total of 7 active areas that are still collecting increment and 8 that are expending on projects in their areas. The majority of the expenses in the Urban Renewal Agency are for improvements such as economic development, capital infrastructure improvements, and project coordination support. Expenditures in each URA are determined by individual URA plans as approved by the agency board. Staff recommends the approval of the recommendation of the Urban Renewal Agency Executive Director's proposed budget. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Josh. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, Vice Chair Brown.
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of the Salem Urban Renewal Agency fiscal year 2024 budget.
Second.
Ooh, second by Nordike. Thank you so much. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Aye.
Member Cohen.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Nordike.
Aye.
Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Chirac.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Chair Stapleton.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. All right, next on the list is the property taxes for the city of Salem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have two property tax levies we have for recommendation for approval. The first is the city's permanent rate, $5.83.15 for general fund operations. And the second is the general obligation bond debt levy of $18,765,580.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions for staff?
Vice Chair, I have one question.
Yeah.
And I think this is a place to ask it. CFO, can you share with us, what does it mean when we have a bad debt and we write it off?
So a bad debt is an accounting practice where you basically recognize revenue that's expected to receive and then it isn't. So you have to book it as a bad debt expense. So there's a matching revenue in both cases.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Right. Okay. No other questions? Vice Chair Brown.
Madam Chair, I move with approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2024 ad valorem property taxes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Phillips. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Aye.
Member Cohen.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
It looks like we're having some difficulty.
Oh.
It's me?
Yeah, and then Vera Brandel, if you could. All right, there we go. Thanks.
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Nordike.
Aye.
Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Chirac.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Chair Stapleton.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, moving into the City of Salem budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick housekeeping note. There can only be 3 mics active at a time. So if you activate your mic, please deactivate it so others can use theirs. The first results area for review this evening is good governance. A total for the results area is $125.7 million with 227.45 FTEs. And we're available for any questions on this area.
All right, yes, Member Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. As this kicks off our budget process, I think it appropriate to just, I don't know if we can get a pulse from everybody as far as approval for the city operations fee. I knew that was kind of, I'm going to say not firmly set from last meeting, if people were in favor of it or not. So that should be a point of discussion amongst us here. The other thing is, I understand there is the difference between state and city as far as vacancy savings. I went through with Josh and looked at the specific ORS that governs state agencies, and I do realize that is different. That being said, I will be a no unless on budgets for the result areas of good governance, welcoming and livable communities, safe and healthy communities for the general fund FTE new positions that are determinant on the offsetting funds of the city operations fee based on the principle that we don't have that money yet. And so that's my principle. That's the standard that I'm keeping. People are free to agree or disagree with me, but that is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh, did you want to speak to this at all?
If there's a specific question, I'm happy to address it. We do anticipate the funding. I will mention that for the increased city operations fee, if for some reason the city council doesn't approve it, we'll modify the budget to reflect that accordingly.
Okay, Member Allen.
So this is a little difficult this evening because the fee and the FTE that are associated with the various fees and concepts are spread throughout several of the budgets. So it's hard to talk about it in just one fell swoop. So for me, I have expressed before my concern with regards to the structure of the budget, and I think that I've expressed a concern with regards to revenue options that are regressive in nature. That's kind of, from my perspective, council's job to work on that. With regards to my ultimate support for the various budgets this evening, I'm comfortable with, I think it came last meeting, the response from the city manager that there was a Group A, a Group B, and a Group C of FTE, that the Group A and B would not be filled until such time as both funding concepts were dealt with. And so with that, I just expressing that I am comfortable to move forward with approving the various budgets.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments on Member Cohen? Yes, Member Norday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh, you alluded to by saying we anticipate funding in regards to Member Cohen's comments. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. So at the very base of how you build a budget, it's a forecast, it's an estimate. So a lot of it is predicated on the passage of a fee schedule in June by the City Council. Part of that is the city operations fee, along with lots of other fee changes. So we're assuming that in the budget. If that doesn't happen, we'd have to make modifications.
So in other words, if council does not approve an operations fee, then the city would propose a smaller budget. Is that fair to say?
So the positions, if we're using the letters A for the proposed operations fee positions, they're tied to that fee increase. So if the increase went away, so would the positions.
Okay, so Josh, would you like to give us the briefing on good governance, and then we can kick off the conversation? Yes, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, Member Hoy.
Thank you. If I may ask, Member Cohen, if it's appropriate, what would you do if you could make it the way you thought it should be? What would it look like?
Thank you for the question. Seeing as though the positions will not be hired until fiscal year 25, my recommendation is just to push them to fiscal year 25, and I will be the first one to vote aye on that. But since we do not have the money for it in fiscal year 24, on principle, with the understanding that yes, what's not hired goes to vacancy savings, but on the principle that you are increasing the FTE for an agency, whether it be the library or the police or the fire or the parks or whatever it might be, you are increasing their baseline to another FTE, which then increases inflation, medical stuff, and that's just something that I see as a budgetary no-no. And so my recommendation is just to push them to next fiscal year.
Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Just to clarify, so the positions are authorized in the budget. So it's a management decision whether or not they're hired, just like every other position in the city budget. I will note that they wouldn't wait until 2025. It's just until City Council has begun implementation of a new revenue source. It could be sooner. It could be partway through the year, but I don't expect it to be a full fiscal year until those positions would be available.
Thank you. That was my understanding of it too, so thanks for helping me see that, clarify it. Oh, yes, Member Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. Trevor Phillips, Councilor Ward 3 member. Anyway, Josh, thank you for being here. Could you just remind us, like, since the operations fee is kind of baked into what we're broadly voting on tonight, when could we start to collect revenue from that if it's adopted before the end of the budgeting process?
The current estimate for implementation, if it's approved in June, it would be effective July 1st, billed in August, and then collected in September. That's just the process for utility bills.
And a follow-up question, I don't know who best asked this to, but if we do get step A and B, which have been discussed but are not actually part of the budget, like A isn't, I think, or B, I guess B is not part of it. But if we do get to A and B, could we expect to hire people in the budgetary year of 23, 24 that we're approving tonight? Like, could we actually hire people before 2025?
So the answer I think was provided last week is that if City Council adopted ordinance, we'd wait for the 30-day period afterwards, and then they'd be eligible to be hired. Or if the City Council referred it to a vote, it would be after passage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Josh, would you like to talk to us about good governance, please?
Sure. I don't have much more to go over on here, but happy to address any questions. You can see the services that are included there. It's one of the larger result areas, and a lot of the big governance pieces are here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Member Tigan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think maybe picking up from what Trevor, you said about Part B, I'd like to offer a motion during this time about the need for sustainable revenue for the city. So I'd like to move that the City of Salem Citizen Budget Committee recommend that the City of Salem adopt an employee payroll tax designed to address the persistent structural imbalance in the city's general fund to take effect as soon as practicable, but no later than January 1st, 2025.
I second.
Second by Brown. Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. First time in 6 years that I've actually written down what I'm going to say at the Budget Committee, so I hope you'll indulge me. I don't believe that the work of this Budget Committee can be complete without offering our recommendation to the Council on what needs to happen in the very near future if we want next year's budget to take the first step towards fiscal sustainability for the city. Is there a better place to have this conversation than good governance? I don't think so. The basic facts of the structural imbalance of our general fund are not in dispute. A generation ago, the voters in the state of Oregon amended the Constitution to constrain the year-over-year growth of property valuations and property tax revenues. Decades later, Salem is a rapidly growing city in an era when the cost of providing services far outpaces the limits placed on our main revenue source. This motion puts in plain language what is necessary to address this imbalance. A new revenue source that can grow alongside the tens of thousands of people that we expect and hope to arrive in Salem in the future. As has been noted, this concept was investigated by a Sustainable Revenue Task Force a few years ago, and the City Council sent it to voters in 2020, but decided to pull it back off the ballot due to the pandemic. The time has come for the Council to enact this revenue source. The year-over-year imbalance the general fund faces is not a creation of the city or how it's been managed. Other governments in Oregon that depend on property tax revenue are facing much the same situation because the issue is structural, which also means it is not the kind of thing we can solve by cutting supplies or mining government operations for inefficiencies. Budget Committee members, including myself, have scoured for a long time looking for them. And as impactful as an independent auditor might be, it's not realistic to think that this person and their office could close this gap either. The Council would face hard questions about this proposed revenue source and not a lot of time to answer them. The projections from the city staff show us that if this new revenue begins in the middle of the next budget year, that probably isn't fast enough to meet council policy, which, remember, is designed just to ensure the city has enough cash on hand to pay its bills throughout the year. The only projection we've been shown where the city meets this cash on hand policy depends on the new revenue source beginning 1 year from now, at the start of fiscal year 2025. When you boil it down, if a new revenue source is not in the general fund by next year, the only way to balance the fiscal year budget is with cuts that we haven't seen at the city since 2008 and 2009. These years should stand out to the committee members. Since 2008 and 2009, when the city last significantly cut employees due to a recession, one budget committee after another has listened to city staff explain how the enterprise has gotten leaner and leaner. Consolidations, cut hours for libraries, mandatory overtime for emergency services. We even heard it this year. Police officers now regularly make life or death decisions over 12-hour shifts, all in the name of efficiency. And dwindling ranks of firefighters stay on call for days on days to ensure a city of 180,000 people has a bare minimum of 43 people ready to respond at a moment's notice. The same number of responders when the city was just over 150,000 people in 2008. This motion recommends that the council, acknowledging the severity of the situation before us as a budget committee, enacts the employee payroll tax. I want to acknowledge that this is a big ask, but it's based on a candid assessment that the city's general fund does not have the capacity to carry the city through more than one election cycle before having to make significant cuts. In such a situation, the city manager has told us that no part of the general fund would be spared. As budgeteers, we need to have the vision and perspective to see that the city would be put at significant risk if we tried to endure the long tail of 2008, 2009 all over again, when we spent the last 15 years trying to claw our way back from those 2 years of cuts, all while welcoming 28,000 more residents. I could, no doubt, go on. It says wait for laughter. Thank you for that. That means a lot, Counselor. So thank you for considering my motion tonight. I look forward to the conversation it sparks and hope we can provide this meaningful recommendation to the council on how to move forward in the next few months and put the city on a positive footing for our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Tigan. Member Chris Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Tigan, for your motion. I agree with virtually everything you just said. I do. Our property tax system is broken. I've been saying it every time I speak publicly lately. Our property tax system is broken. It's broken in Salem. It's broken in Portland. It's broken in Eugene. It's broken. And we keep putting Band-Aid after Band-Aid on this system to try to provide the services that our residents demand and need. And we heard tonight from two of our important community members about that need and why it's so important. And as counselors, we hear that all the time. I am torn because I was the person who made the motion to refer the property or the payroll tax to the voters last time. I wasn't willing to impose it. I still don't know that I am. But I'm going to support this motion tonight at this budget committee. I don't know how I'll vote on it when we have to address it at council yet. But I'm going to support this because our budget requires it. From strictly a budgetary perspective, there is no other option. We have to support this motion. Thank you.
Yes, Member Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, I had some comments prepared in advance of the meeting, and I was going to make them about a different subject, but I think they adapt well to this situation, and I strongly support the motion. It addresses a major concern that I had at the last meeting, which is getting the money into the budget, getting the money into the city coffers, for want of a better word, as fast as possible. I think the motion as proposed would be a big step forward. It would show that the city is committed to rebuilding vital services, including law enforcement, firefighting, and emergency medical response. It would show that the city is committed to stabilizing its revenue, a step that is essential to financial security. It would show that the city is committed to a work environment which enables current employees to do their best and which enhances the recruitment of new staff. And it would show that the council is mad as heck about austerity budgets and isn't going to take them anymore. One other comment. When I think about the city's financial situation, which has been referred to at least twice just right now, I think of what a working person would do if he or she had been asked to take on extra work for several years without being paid a wage that reflected the extra responsibility. They would ask for a raise. And I think it's time for the city to ask to build in a raise to its budget. And I do strongly support the motion. I think it addresses the concerns that I had earlier, and it's high time.
Thank you so much. Member Gonzalez, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Chair. I'm going to be voting against the motion, setting aside the realities we have, and knowing, from our first two people that provided some testimony, there are people deciding whether to eat, pay the rent, put some gas in the car. That's today. They're in the negative today, and I want the voters to help us make this decision. And I trust them that they'll do that. That way, when people are hit with this, because I think we're going to have to make a hard decision one way or the other, then they'll know that it was their peers that did it, and as a city we voted. Because there are a lot of people that are politically invisible that will never get a chance for their voice to be heard. So.
Thank you, Member Gonzalez. Yes, Member Julie Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Tigan, with all due respect, I made some notes, too. State unions are already trying to find a way to exempt their employees. Low-wage earners would be exempt. So a tax on producers, again, covering for those not inclined to work. Council placing this burden on Salemites without a vote is unacceptable in my opinion. Last. If we believe the employee-paid payroll tax is justified and supported by the public, why would we not take it to a vote for the people to verify, to hear from our own constituents?
Thank you. Yes, Member Milton.
I feel you. I'm one of those people that I try to think our job is to speak on behalf of all taxpayers. And when we think of this payroll tax, I struggle. I might be able to pay this payroll tax, but I feel for the people that might be in positions where they can't, and they're deciding behind, do I pay for my medical bills? Do I pay for food? Do I pay for rent? Do I pay my car payment? Do I pay my car insurance? Do I pay my utilities? And I do feel that it would be absolutely inappropriate for us to make that decision without taking it to the citizens. Too often, we see government make this decision without taking it to the citizens, and we get frustrated with it. We get angry, actually, to be honest. So I just don't feel it would be appropriate at all for us to make that decision, and so my vote will be a nay.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry.
Member Allen.
Well, I just had a clarifying question for the maker of the motion.
Sure.
Was your motion, I'm sorry that I didn't write it down or memorize it well enough, did it specify that it was going to be council action, or could it be council sending it to the voters?
Thank you. The specific motion says that the Salem City Council adopt an employee payroll tax. So it's written as if, yes, the City Council would enact it of their own accord without sending it to the voters.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Of course.
Yes, Member Phillips.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Paul, for the motion. This is easily the most difficult budget that I've had, and I think it's only my third, but third time's a charm. I think we kind of knew that this was coming. That before I was on council, this was in process of being referred to the voters before the pandemic hit, and it was, I think, wisely removed at that time. We were fortunate to have the one-time funding that got us through that crisis, but there are numerous crises that are cresting right now and have no end in sight. And not doing this, in my opinion, is another self-goal. It's another crisis on top of so many others, and I just don't think we can afford it. I understand that there may be frustration of a reluctance to have the voters consider this, but getting this kind of information to voters in time to solve the structural deficits that we face as a result of the broken taxation system here in the state of Oregon would take time we just don't have. In 2020, there was potentially time, but that leeway is gone. And I don't just speak as someone, an unpaid volunteer who want to vote, so the voters do have control ultimately in who they elect as their counselors. But I speak to you as a resident of this community for the last 15 years. I've got kids here, and I've worked at our emergency room. And the prospect of, in my opinion, defunding in some way the need for police, for fire, for first responders, for critical staff that support them and other roles in our community keeps me awake at night. I am more scared of not doing this than any anger I could possibly face from the voters. I do not expect to be popular after this, but this must happen, in my opinion. I will vote yes, and I will do so emphatically.
Thank you. And, a question that came to mind when you were speaking was, what happens if it's no? And the need doesn't change. The issue doesn't change. So, we're right back there where we started, holding a bunch of really hard decisions that just got a heck of a lot harder to make. I think I've been pretty clear about my stance on this topic throughout different conversations and work sessions and small groups. If it were a new idea, if it was a new program, I would have no problem sending it to the voters to see what they thought about it. But this is critical services. This is the functioning of the city. And to me, it's a hard reality, but I was elected to make hard decisions. And there is full access to me, and I know every other counselor and the mayor, and I know that there will be plenty of time for public input and feedback, but it doesn't change the fact that I feel like this is something that we're gonna need to do. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Member Curtis, you had your hand up.
Thank you. This has been a tough one for me as a newbie. You've all said it, it's very difficult. One of the things that I really want our city to maintain is our services to homeless people and people who are food insecure. And if we do not get this additional revenue, it's my understanding from the city manager, those things would be cut because of the one-time funding that's going away. I heard or read today in the Oregonian that the mayor of Portland is convening a committee of, public and private entities that is going to be looking at all the fees and taxes and costs that are building up in Portland. Because he feels, and I think a lot of us understand, it's getting a little out of hand. A tax for this, a tax for that, a 14% increase in your power, Northwest Natural is going up. I mean, it's all really hitting households very hard. So because of that, and Salem's no different, I do support the payroll tax. I do support the operations fee as well, but we're not discussing that. But I think the only way that I would vote yes is if we had some language added to the motion that would encourage the city council and city staff to look at ways of building in more equity so that low wage earners would be either exempt or pay less. And I'm not talking just about minimum wage. I'm talking about low wage, and how that would be calculated, I'm not sure. There's different ways of doing it. It might be a family that's on, reduced utility billings or something. And whether you'd have to prove that to your employer, when they collected the tax, I'm not sure. But I think that's really critical for us to build in that recognizance that we've got a lot of people suffering with low wages in this community, and to put a new tax, on their earnings is just too much. So I do support it, but I think we have to address that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Nishioka.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member Curtis, and I would like to expand on that and agree that we would want to try to find ways to protect the lower earners. What that looks like, I think we would need to study it or review it. I also want to say that I know that those of us that would be in favor of council voting for the payroll tax, as Member Phillips has already said, he'll take the heat. I also want to point out that if we had to cut services, how much heat would we get because there was not available police to come to somebody, that the medics couldn't get to you when your husband was having a heart attack. Those would maybe come a little later, but those would be also loud cries. If we continue to cut services and those weren't available, I think we would also have a very angry group of citizens. So I think we need to see it in a wider view as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Nishioka. Yes, Member Allen.
I will simply state that I will reluctantly not support the motion if the motion is specifying which avenue to take. If the motion was ambivalent and left it up to council to decide which path to take, I would support it. But if the motion is going to be that council enact it, then I can't support that.
Thank you. Member Brown?
Madam Chair, with the motion that's still on the floor, are we allowed to, is Member Tigan allowed to amend it or no?
Anybody is allowed to amend it.
Well, hold up before I amend anything. So my struggle is this. We heard this last week and the week before that we are on a cliff, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking around, are we still on the cliff? Financially, I'm seeing some heads. We're still on the cliff, right? And so if we're still on the cliff and we do not want to cut services, we do not want to defund any police department or first responders, we don't want to defund, what's the alternative if we are still on this cliff? And that's the question. I'll just let it sit there in the room because I'm not exactly sure. Because if we're representing our voters and they put us in these chairs because they trust our leadership, a part of me says, once again, we're not going to make every voter happy. And if we could, is that what we really want? So I think we do have some hard decisions to make, city councilors and also our budget committee. I think it requires some legitimate thought as to how do we get back from the cliff? What's our safety net?
Member Gwynn.
I guess I would just say the city's on a cliff, but a lot of families are on a cliff too. There's the people that I have been talking to are saying, we support police, we support fire, but you need to come to us. We, as the voters, should be the ones to decide. So I can't support your motion.
Member Schrock, then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to support Member Tigan's motion and recognizing that it would be a recommendation from the Budget Committee. The whole budget will go to council, and so council, of course, will make the ultimate decision. But if I can give some direction in the form of support of this motion, I'm willing to do that. In terms of, to please enact a employee-paid payroll tax. I came here tonight fully prepared to vote in support of the budget, knowing full well that, as city manager and his team have made clear, it's based on additional revenue sources. And those two sources, the operations fee increase and the employee paid payroll tax, are the ones that have gotten all the work. They've been vetted for, over about 4 years now. So it was clear to me that, yes, if we're going to have this budget and not have to make a lot of severe cuts, then we do need those revenue sources, and they should be go ahead and be enacted. And the other thing is, I see in this budget a lot of good city services for lower income people. There's all the wonderful library programs, including ones targeted to the toddlers, the reading hour and teens. There's free parks to use, including free and low-cost youth recreation programs. There's a lot of different areas that are serving, especially low-income people in our community. I mean, they're serving everyone, but low-income people, if we were to cut some of these services, would I think would have a loss. And then that's even more impactful by, with Rick Gappo from Marion Pope Food Share and DJ Vincent. Those are specific programs, but the budget and city services are full of other programs that help lower income people. So I'm going to support the motion. And I guess I just have to mention, I have the utmost respect for Member Tigan, and I think he's the longest serving member on this budget committee and has seen and worked on more city budgets than any of us. So I think he really knows what he's talking about, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Member Schrock. Member Milton and I and Member Nordyke came on at the same time, and I think Mayor Hoy was here too. So we're close. We're close. I haven't been keeping attendance though. So.
Mayor Hoy, Member Hoy, saw your hand go up. Are you still interested? Okay, and then we'll go to Vera Brandel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of curiosity, and it always has been for me in my life as a voter, why police and fire are always the big throwdown, Like, why the fear factor right off the top? And I don't believe for 1 minute that the city of Salem is going to create a situation where there is complete and total chaos and nobody to help, The only other thing I want to add is I do believe if this moves forward at all, we need to find out if there is an effort to keep state workers from contributing. And I just don't. I have heard rumored that there's a movement to try to stop that from happening. So,
thank you. Really quick, Chris Hoy would like to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think anybody's throwing down a fear factor in terms of the services. I think if you look at our general fund, you'll see that the vast majority of those dollars go to police and fire. And we're talking about general fund dollars here, and you have to cut. We're talking about general fund cuts. If we make cuts, we have a $19.1 million gap. That's police and fire. Those are the vast majority of that budget are made up by the staff in those two departments. So it's just reality. It's just how our city is funded. That's just reality. It's not about fear at all. In terms of people being exempt from any potential payroll tax, I don't know of any way that could happen, and I certainly wouldn't support it.
I see Member Phillips would like to also comment, so Vera Brandel, we're getting there. Would you like? Okay, go ahead, Member Vera Brandel.
I just had a couple of questions. One, the way that the motion is being presented, is it specifying any sort of tiers to who pays what, or that would be determined by council?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I wrote a couple different versions of the motion and really went with the plainest one I could, so that as much of the discretion could be left to the council to determine questions of equity in the structure, if there's, a level at which it's set above or below. I think most of those questions are very critical, and also the council's in the best position to answer them. And I think the idea of the motion was to convey in as plain language as possible that from the Budget Committee's perspective, we recognize that the hole has to be filled, and it has to be filled on a timeline. And the uncertainty of the result of a vote is the thing that hung in my mind when I wrote it this way.
And then a clarifying question as well for anyone. How does the city define low income when we're talking about having tiers?
Generally, it's 80% of area median income. It's a HUD definition that we would use.
Thank you. I am generally supportive of this moving forward for a lot of the reasons that everyone else has stated. I have a very big concern for the things that are at risk of being cut and the services that are at risk of being cut if we don't have revenue services. As we're talked about today, we have had hundreds of people served by our houseless services in the city, and the cost to our city, if those services are then cut, I think is exponentially more. I trust that our city council would have a very thoughtful discussion about this in terms of how to implement it in the most equitable way. So generally, yes, I am supportive, and I appreciate you bringing this forward.
Thank you. Yes, Member Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I have a vague recollection that the city of Eugene did something similar. Is that true?
Yes, Josh, would you like to come up and give a brief
And then I'd have
rundown?
a second question after that.
Of course.
The current proposal that we're looking at is a little bit different. The city of Eugene, they implemented an employer payroll tax, an employee payroll tax, and a self-employment tax. The current recommendation is for a self-employment and employee paid payroll tax. And they did implement a few different tiers also.
Thank you. And with that, it was at the council's discretion, not the voters. Is that correct?
That is correct, with one caveat that in 2027, they'll send it to the voters. So they implemented it, and then they created kind of a sunset where it had to go to voters to continue it.
To Member Teagan, would you accept something similar where if it goes forward, then we have the will of the people speak? For me, I think the general population has been hit with a lot of sticks by regulations. This is coming from a government employee. And I think it's easier to attract people with honey versus vinegar. You can say whatever. And with carrots more than sticks. And so I understand, which is why I said I would be no because of the positions need the funding. So it'd be hypocritical of me to then not allow funding, right? But I also know the will of the people is something that is a tantamount priority to me. And so I would be a courtesy yes to the council if there was a sunset motion or something that would then refer this to the people of Salem. Thank you.
Member Phillips.
My goal would be to ask for a 5-minute recess. I may be entertaining a substitute motion or a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Would that be a possibility?
Is
I need some
everybody-
time to collect some thoughts. I wasn't preparing to do that.
No.
Well, the recess. I'm just, right now I'm asking for a recess.
Real quick, Mayor Hoy would like to say something,
Okay.
and then we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just some food for thought. The council is going to take whatever information, we're taking this all in, whether we vote on this or not, we're listening to everything, and we're going to ultimately make a decision based on all of that information, whether there's a recommendation from the Budget Committee, whether there's not. If this motion, for instance, were to pass just like it sits right now, we're not bound by that motion in terms of how it will look. We'll still be having a debate with public input and all of those things about if it'll be tiered, if we do it, or if we send it to the voters. So all of those things will still be left ultimately to be decided. The council isn't bound by our advisory vote. So I just think that that's helpful to keep in mind. Like I said during my initial comments, I don't know how I'll vote when it comes to council in terms of whether to impose it or whether to send it to voters. I don't know where I'm at yet, but I do believe that more revenue is critical for this budget. And because of that, I'm supporting this motion because I think there is no way around the fact that our revenue system is broken, and this is a step towards fixing it. How that ultimately looks is going to be, will decide whether I vote for it or not, and that'll depend on what the majority of the council decides. And so all those things remain to be seen. But I just think it's helpful to remember, this is a recommendation. It's sort of it helps us understand where this group is as a body, which is very, very helpful. But I wouldn't get too caught up in the detail of it because that's all subject to a council discussion and vote. That being said, if there is something that you don't like about this motion, every person here is entitled to offer an amendment to a motion or a substitute motion. There are a variety of things. If there are certain words that would make you more comfortable, you can offer an amendment to say, how about we strike these words, or how about we add these words? That's available to every person here. So just remember that, and maybe if we go with Member Phillips' suggestion of a break, people can have some time to think about those things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
7 seconds.
All right, thank you, everybody. I was told that was the longest 5 minutes they've ever had. So that's great. So I wanted to share something that I was talking with. I had some really good questions on the break and just trying to help this person understand where I was coming from. And so I wanted to take a minute to just talk about this a little bit and speak just really plainly. I would love to go to the voters, but the reasons why I don't feel like it is an option that's available to me at this point in time is that we have a lot of hard things coming. One of them is going to be an operations fee increase, and that's going to take effect in August. And so we are all prepared to have some tough conversations with some constituents who are really frustrated and, dare I say, angry at that point in time. And we will need to navigate that with our constituents. I will then have a couple of months at that point in time in order to explain a really complicated past in Oregon tax law and a very complicated and new idea. It's maybe not complicated, but it is new to try to address the issue. So explaining measures 5 and 50 to even talk about how we got here, and then to tackle the idea of how we were going to propose to fix it is another hard conversation to have to explain. It's a lift. And we have people who are maybe frustrated with us already and frustrated with the situation. The way that this would work is that the 8 counselors and the mayor would be in charge of getting this across the finish line. We won't have help from anybody else. The city will not be able to help us. They will be able to get us to a certain point, and then they have to back away. So when it came time for us to go for the bond, there was a point in time where they stopped, and it was a handful of us who were charged with bringing this home. And that was a monumental lift. And that was just last year. We're still tired from that lift. But we threw our heart and souls into it. So you have 9 volunteers. Most of us have jobs on the side. None of us are independently wealthy. Nobody is going to fund our campaign. So I just see hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. And I am pretty sure that a very well-funded opposition campaign will be up against me. And that is the last hurdle that I don't think I can clear that. I'm just being really honest. This is going to come down to the 9 volunteers that are your city council. And that is a lot to ask of us. It might be too much to ask of us. And I honestly think it is. And the reason why I think we have to do this just with us here and take the response is that I don't think I can deliver that for us. I don't have the skills. That's not available to me. It's setting me up for failure. And the failure is response times and police officers and youth services and the library and parks. And that's being set squarely on my shoulders. I don't have the mayor's vote yet. So it is on me. And that's the weight that I carry. That's the weight I bring to this. And that's why I'm so supportive of this moving forward. We have to do something, and I know it's hard. I know it's hard. But I was made to do hard things. I think we all were. So those are my comments to kick us off again. I hope that my stance is maybe a little bit better understood where I'm coming from. Do we have, yes, Councilor Gwen, take it away.
I just want to say, I appreciate your passion, and you know that I respect you. I just go back to families are hurting too. Our Marion Polk food share, I don't remember his title, but he just said 18,000 families were impacted in 1 month. So if we do this without going to the voters, we're going to have more people at our food share. We're going to have more people hurt by this, and I just can't see us doing it without taking this to the voters.
I hear you, and I respect you, and I hope you know that for sure. I think that people will be hurt either way, and that's the hard reality that we have to sit with. This is going to be hard either way, and I know that if we can build in equity, and if we can build in ways that our low wage earners have a way to get some support, which I think we have a fix for that, then I think that we can do this together. I think we can get there, offering support to those who really need it and making sure that services continue to function. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Keith. Member Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair, and no worries. You know what, following what Councilor Gwynn said, you know, the city's own report, and I think us as council has received a lot of information on this topic, and it's like two tracks going at once, and I know there's frustration, and but I was thinking, I don't know if we all have the same info, but one of the things I did want to mention, and it's true, well, this is according to the city's own report, that we are going to go into recession. So who's ever hurting today, those 18,000 people, there will be more tomorrow. It's just a fact. You know, and as a counselor, I see my role as one that's continually learning and continually listening. You know, and so it's not just I got voted and I'm gonna, you know, just do what my heart tells me. No, I'm always looking for the people's voices. I'm their voice here. That's basically, you know. But I do have some questions for Josh, just so we're all on the same page. Because even if the council votes, I think you had mentioned that a petition-led referendum could still happen. And you shared with us the low barrier, the small amount of people it takes that could undo this whole thing. You know, so I want to, if you can share that part with me, but also share the scenarios. What are the scenarios that if it does go to a vote and it doesn't pass, then there's May, then there's council action. Yeah, I don't know why today it just felt like we have to make a decision today on this and it's just one or the other, and it's not true. Even though time is running out, we still have time. You know, so I want to just get some information from Josh so we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I'll look to Dan to correct me if I'm wrong. But after the City Council would do a second reading on the ordinance, that they'd have 30 days for a referendum to be filed. And I believe it's around 4,000 votes that would have to be collected. It's 10% of the last mayoral election. And then as far as the timing, I think there is an opportunity for November and May, but I will say every month that keeps going, where we're continuing to fund balance gives us less flexibility into the future, and it's going to be really hard to recover from that.
Thank you. Member Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the comments and of my colleagues and members on this body. At this time, I'm going to call this a substitute motion, but I'm unclear for the record if it's really more of a friendly amendment versus a substitute motion. So let me just move on. I move as a substitute motion. I move that the City of Salem Citizen Budget Committee recommend that the Salem City Council adopt an employee payroll tax equitably designed to address the persistent structural imbalance in the city's general fund to take effect as soon as practicable, but no later than January 2025, and consider referring to voters, including a sunset.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Second by Nishioka.
So can I speak to this?
Yes, please.
So I think that my goal in this is, after really hearing from my fellow members tonight, My goal is to move forward with as much of a consensus as we can get. We may have some disagreements, and it may be best that we in council debate that moving forward. But I have heard at one point or time from essentially every member of this body that we know that we need more staff, that we know that we need these things. But the question is how we get there. And my goal is to create the wording in this so that there's flexibility and we're not pinned down, and to leave the options open of referring it to the voters, and also to kind of pin us in that we really will be looking at, and in my intention, to force us to build it more equitably. I don't know what that looks like. It's my understanding that what has been put before us has been done so for a variety of reasons. Nothing is free. When you build things with more complexity, it's my understanding that that will cost more FTEs to implement and to administer. So the amount that you're collecting will be less because you'll have to pay more FTEs just to get it back. So it's not an easy decision, but I think it is the right decision. I don't intend this to mirror exactly what happened in Eugene, but I do think that, in my personal opinion, that simple isn't necessarily the best in this case. So I'm hoping that this gets us more of a consensus tonight, because for everything that you said, Chair Stapleton, so eloquently, there really is an urgency in terms of time. And the prospect of having a handful of unpaid elected volunteers try to champion that through, whereas it feels like when we did the bond, we had an extra year. You know, we started 16 months before a November vote, and we're looking to do that minus a year. If you really want to get this at the soonest possible moment to where you could, generate fees or additional revenue. So I think that this is helpful. I personally, because of comments made tonight, am more in favor of something like a sunset, but my goal is not to pin us down on those things and just to kind of force us to tackle it as I've worded it.
Thank you so much. Yes, Member Milton.
I appreciate all your comments. I have a question. So, Josh, this may be more for you, but when do we go off the cliff? What year was that?
A little nuanced, and it depends. So we have a budget before us. If it's adopted as proposed, it changes a little bit from if it's not. But basically, the fiscal year 2025 budget, so not the one you're looking at this year, but the one for next year. If there's no part two, will have to look a lot different. You have to balance the budget that year, or you can't adopt the next one. You're out of fund balance.
That's it. So in 2025, we'll be upside down. We'll be in the red.
Correct, yes.
If we don't pass this budget.
If you don't pass this budget and then the city council enacts some other revenue source for implementation during fiscal year 2025.
So, and I appreciate your amendment. If we let's say we agreed to this, right? And then we decided to take this to the voters. Could we have time to get this out to the voters and build it up over time? I feel for each and every one of you guys that would have to try and build this case up. But I'm just trying to figure out, do we have time to take this to the voters and possibly get their approval for this, get the votes to approve this, or are we at that point there's no time?
I will say that any added time when you are looking at trying to communicate with voters and get something across is critical. Time is critical. And that's, why I feel so passionate about this right now, is that I don't feel that I have it.
Okay.
So that's the short answer from me. Josh, did you have something to add?
Just a comment, we've thrown out some implementation timelines. They're already pretty aggressive. So, for example, I think I answered one that if the council were to enact an ordinance in June, July, that it could be effective the following July. That's extremely aggressive. If it were to pass in November, we're saying January 2025. If it were to go to the next May election, that general election, again, it's going to push it out even further. You wouldn't see any revenue during fiscal year 2025. We wouldn't be able to adopt that budget without making changes in this one.
Thank you.
And
Member Brown.
thanks, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So just for clarification, and thanks, Member Milton, for bringing that to the forefront. That puts us in a very horrific place, knowing that something is we're going to have to cut something. Would you agree with that, CFO? We'll have to cut something?
Yes, we have to adopt a balanced budget. So if we don't have more revenue, we have to reduce expenses.
Okay, and I think Mr. Mayor said this earlier, that those two main, you mentioned the fire department and police department, right? So when I say we're gonna have to cut something, and the CFO says, yes, we have to cut, that's the first place we cut. Possibly. So here's my argument. Here's my argument, I'm gonna just put this out there. For us not to make a decision, we are in essence saying we are okay with cutting our first responders. Our silence speaks to that. Meaning sooner or later, those police officers that were in here on Monday night, and last week, those firefighters that were here last week, we are in essence saying today, we are okay with cutting them 2 years from now.
Member, can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
I think maybe we can just restate some of the things we heard from city staff. I think we heard the city manager say that the first thing that would be cut if we didn't have additional revenue was services that have been adopted in the last 3 years for homelessness in the city. That's the first thing that would go, because it's the farthest from the core of the city's function. After that, and sorry, city manager, not to put words in your mouth, but I think what he said was that there wasn't a part of the general fund that wouldn't be affected. Everything would be affected. So that's police, fire, library, parks, anything that's funded by the general fund. And I think that's the essence of my position about this, that the city council needs to act, is not that I don't trust the voters, or that I don't think we should listen to voters, or that voters shouldn't have a say. They do have a say. They elected the city council.
Correct.
But is that if the voters decide not to enact the city, to decide not to enact it, or another pandemic comes and we have to pull it off the ballot, or something else happens that, well, we decide not to take the vote, what comes after that is cuts. And we're trying, as a person who's like looked at this budget for 6 years, I think the thing we actually really want to avoid is digging ourselves a hole that will take us 15 years to get out of. Which is the last time we did cuts, that's what happened. And to me, that has to be part of our calculus as the budget committee, is that if we don't continue to produce a sane budget every year, it takes the city so long because of the property tax system to repair the damage done when cuts are required to balance the budget. And so that's the essence of my position about it.
Thanks for sharing, Member Tigan.
I have one question here. So if we were to go to the voters in November and it fails and we have to go back out in May again, by the time we're all sitting in this room again, the vote will not have gone to the voters yet. And we will have to make cuts to that budget, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You'd have to look at a budget with reductions and then possibly reconvene or leave it to the city council to make adjustments if and when a revenue measure passes. The timing is extremely challenging with that one, just with when the budget has to be adopted, when it actually is effective. And again, for the payroll tax solution, it pushes it out even further.
Thank you. I saw Member Hoy first, and then we'll go Allen. Sure, of course, Member Allen.
Can you go to her first? No, just kidding. Josh, no, please don't go away. I'm just struggling with a bouncing ball, and I don't have the 6 graphs that you had with regards to fund balance. But I'm struggling with your timeline from this perspective. If the scenario would be that the council could enact the utility tax or the utility fee, we know that until such time as the voters pass it or council passes the payroll tax, that there would be no additional FTE. I believe that your calculus is assuming that the fund balance would be drawn down in this budget as it's presented, but it wouldn't be drawn down to that extent. It would have an additional revenue source, and it would not have those additional FTE drawing down the expense. Am I correct?
To some extent, yes. There are a few things that are currently proposed to be funded with the operations fee that are existing, like the SOS team, security at the parkades. That's a current expense that we're looking to continue. So there are some things that would simply draw down fund balance further without it. So with the proposed budget you're looking at, we're looking at about $11 million deficit for the current year, and then escalating to around $15 million if the operations fee is increased. We currently have a fund balance of $37 million, so very quickly is depleted without that other revenue source that comes into play.
I don't disagree that it's going down and we have a problem. I'm not trying to minimize that. I'm not sure that it happens quite as quickly as it was described.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you. Are you ready? Okay, Member Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh, back in a work session, I'm trying to remember if we were talking about the operations fee or the payroll tax or both, that the city is not equipped technologically to be equitable. Do you remember that?
I do. I believe that's in reference to the city operations fee. We're currently in the midst of implementing a utility billing software that would allow us to implement a different equity component. And I'll emphasize this because I know Public Works wants me to. It's not necessarily the system that is also the limitation, it's a data set. So some other mechanism to differentiate commercial accounts. So those two pieces for the city operations fee. We currently don't have a technological component to collect the payroll tax. So when we go out for a request for proposal for that payroll tax, if it were to happen, we would include whatever structure components the city council sets as a requirement.
Thanks for helping me remember that. 2 more little things. One, I don't know. What's it cost to have a special election? Can you do something like this and call the people to vote before November, or is that not a possibility?
For a revenue measure, you want to do it at a May or November election. If not, you have to believe I get a double majority, so you have to get a much higher percentage of the vote as opposed to a simple majority.
Okay. Last, I guess my hope would be that we could put this on the November ballot and do our best to sell not only the voters, but myself included on this. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Phillips.
Thank you. So I know that there's the motion right now is the substitute motion. So I hope I've gotten a couple votes. I can't tell by the comments, but I do, broadly speaking, there's still the bigger debate, which in my mind, I just want to, what I heard from the people who testified tonight in terms of Church at the Park and the Marion Polk County Food Share is that they need us to get more revenue, that they are very likely aware of the increasing utilization of their services, and they're recommending that we raise revenue. I heard that very clearly. And it makes sense to me that you would want the infrastructure, your government, to be as well prepared as possible going into any potential adversity. I think that the jury is still out, and I don't know that it's better or worse in terms of the need becoming greater or less with a recession. In terms of the number of people employed right now, it's at record amounts. 97% of people are working. It's 3% of people that are unemployed. So the idea that people aren't working is no longer true. It's tied with the lowest that it's ever been. So a recession may happen. I don't know when it will or if it will. The things are really confusing right now, and there's not a lot of precedent. But what I've heard from staff, what I've seen being here and paying attention to this as a counselor and before that, and what I've heard from the people providing resources to the people who need it most, is that we should and need to raise revenue. In terms of like what would be cut first, the prospect of us cutting the services that we've built in place, our managed micro shelter sites, is terrifying. I mean, when I asked the question, what would our point in time count look like if we didn't have those services? What I heard is it was somewhere around 450 to 500 more homeless people. So I understand the idea that people don't think that what we're doing makes a difference, and it's not mathematically accurate. The problem is the need is so much greater than the resources we currently have. So this is a way to get us more resources to at least continue the things that are in fact working. I mean, questions that I didn't get to ask were that, you know, the idea that we're getting a positive destination to like 60 or 65% of people who utilize those services in our community is far above what I recall from being on the Homeless Solutions Task Force as like a peer norm. What other communities achieve is closer to 25 or 30%. So to me, that speaks to the low-hanging fruit, the ability to do so much good in our community for a very reasonable amount of cost and resource expenditure. So, you know, let me just conclude by, I think that we have an improved motion. I think the original motion was good in its core and needed, but I think that this is even better. And I hope that I've convinced at least a few of you from being on the fence to voting yes. And again, I emphatically support my own motion.
Thank you. We have two more people. I'm going to go to Linda Nishioka first, and then I'll head to you, Mayor. Is that okay? All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to also add that I believe at our next work session, we as a council, with staff being able to help guide us, I believe that we can find equitable ways to support low-wage earners. The question that was asked by Member Hoy was in regards to the software not being able to do data entry, but that was for the larger corporations, not necessarily for the low-wage earner. I think that we can find other ways, even with the operations fee, to support them. And also, again, to Member Gwynn's comments about she wants to make sure that the food share is available. Problem is, if we don't have the money, it won't be operating. So it's important to know that we need the revenue so that all of these good services can continue to do the good work that they are doing. It's scary. We think that, you know, it's like, okay, something's going to go away, but many things will either be reduced or will be gone. And those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And I know that we do support Marion Polk Food Share, and I know that there are other revenue streams that do support them as well. But I would really love to continue to support them in our capacity. Mayor Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilor Phillips, for your amended motion. I think it's a good amendment. I like the sentiment of it. I intend to support it. What I heard you say a minute ago, I think I can distill everything you said in your very MD way down into my very former deputy way. Okay. I want everybody to remember what this city looked like in 2017. Do you remember downtown? I do. I remember a lot of people lining our streets downtown, living in tents. I remember people afraid to go downtown. I remember people living in squalor downtown. It was not a good deal. It was not a good situation for anybody. It wasn't a good situation for the people living there on the streets. It wasn't a good good thing for business owners. It wasn't a good thing for patrons. It wasn't a good thing. It definitely wasn't a good thing for city councilors, because we got a lot of heat. And we listened to our community, and we developed a whole series of services that we knew were tenuous because we knew they were mostly paid with one-time money. We knew that. We said up front, this is one-time money. And if we can't figure out a way to continue this, these programs will end. Well, here we are, folks. These programs will end if we don't have new revenue. That's the bottom line. And we will go back to that. And this isn't a scare tactic. It's not a statement. The fact is that if we're not providing micro shelters, if we're not providing the navigation center, places like this for people to go, that is the reality, because nobody else has stepped up to solve this problem in that time. It's only been the city and with many partners. But in terms of the funding, that's where we're going to be. And that's just the reality. Thank you.
Yes, Mickey.
Thank you. I haven't spoken up, so I just wanted to mention, thank you so much for your amended motion. I really appreciate it, Member Phillips, and I appreciate your original one, because I feel that us as a budget committee, we have a responsibility to balance the budget, but we also have a responsibility to maintain the infrastructure and services to the residents of Salem, and that's under extreme pressures from increased costs, and our population just keeps growing. And I feel a great sense of responsibility for that, and I realize it's going to be hard on a lot of people. And as I've said, and me included, I was thinking, how am I going to do this? Well, I may not be able to support all the charitable organizations that I try to do now. I already don't go out to dinner. I don't go out and get coffee. I'm single wage earner in my household. This isn't going to be easy. But I feel that we have a responsibility to do this. The residents not only need that consistency and stability, but they have come to expect it. And I feel we need to do that. This recommendation that we have on the floor potentially, I like the fact that it includes the equity part and the sunset part. I think this, I like the idea of the sunset because it will give, if the decision is made to do that, it could give the voters a chance to make a decision a little bit further down the road. But right now, we need something to cover us because we are in a crisis. I think of, given a few more years to send it to the voters, we have a new hotel, we're looking at potential commercial air, we're looking at all kinds of things. I look at the way downtown is flourishing and growing, and we could probably use a little time to look at other revenue sources and also look at the economy possibly helping fill in a lot of gaps. So I am supportive of the amended motion. I also think of the West Salem Fire Station, since I represent West Salem. We got a fire station built and then it was closed down because of budget constraints. It was closed in 2012 and it sat there without anybody there for 6 years, and the need for services just kept growing. And I thank goodness the budget committee or council, whoever, appropriated the $1.2 million back in 2019 to get it going, because West Salem is definitely growing. I know myself, because of my mom, I've needed to call 911 a number of times in the last couple of years, and I'm very thankful that it's there. Other things in West Salem, because I think of West Salem as being just kind of a little separated. We're so reliant on Salem for the water that comes across and the sewer and everything. And I just think that we need to move forward with this, because we've also talked about helping to maybe have additional water sources for West Salem or different things to help in case something happened to the bridge and we didn't have those things. So to give us some Well, I could just keep rambling, but I just wanted to say I do support I do support this. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this in a number of weeks, but at least for tonight, I feel that we have a responsibility to do something.
Thank you. All right. Well, it looks like the recorder. Oh, Member Nordyke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate hearing from almost every single member on the substitute motion and the original motion. This motion was not on our agenda tonight, so we don't have members of the public lined up to share their input on it. Council has an upcoming work session on revenue options which will, quote, include recent comparative analysis from other cities. And until I have that information, my vote is no. Until I've spoken to constituents about the idea of council unilaterally adopting a payroll tax instead of sending it to the voters, my vote is no. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the recorder please call the roll? Oh, I'm so sorry. Member Dixon?
Which are we voting on?
Okay, would you mind restating that really quick, just so everybody's clear? And yes, the substitute motion from Member Phillips. But Josh, did you have something to say?
Just to clarify, it is a substitute motion. You won't go back to the original. It replaces the original motion.
Correct. Would it be helpful for everybody? Okay. Trevor, if you could reread that.
Okay. I move that the City of Salem Citizen Budget Committee recommend that the Salem City Council adopt an employee payroll tax equitably designed to address the persistent structural imbalance in the city's general fund to take effect as soon as is practicable, but no later than January 1st, 2025, and consider referring to voters, including a sunset.
Okay. Thank you. Are we ready? Call the roll, please.
Member Milton?
Nay.
Member Cohen?
Aye.
Member Allen?
Aye.
Member Tigan?
Aye.
Member Vieira Brandel?
Aye.
Member Nishioka?
Aye.
Member Phillips?
Aye.
Member Gwen?
Nay.
Member Gonzalez?
Nay.
Member Julie Hoy?
Nay.
Member Nordyke?
Nay.
Member Varney?
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy?
Aye.
Member Dixon?
Aye.
Member Curtis?
Aye.
Member Chirac?
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown?
Aye.
Chair Stapleton?
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. So we are to good governance again. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate this. I'll just pause really quick here and say thank you. I know that was hard. It's a hard conversation to have, but your input is very valuable, and hearing your opinions on this is very helpful to the council. So thank you very much. All right. So we are to good governance. Vice Chair, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move for the approval of the City of Salem's.
Microphone, sorry.
You're all right.
Thank you. I should know that by now. Madam Chair, I move for the approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2024 Good Governance Result Area Budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Phillips. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton?
Nay.
Member Cohen is not here. Member Allen?
Aye.
Member Tigan?
Aye.
Member Vieira Brandel?
Aye.
Member Nishioka?
Aye.
Member Phillips?
Aye.
Member Gwen?
Nay.
Member Gonzalez?
Nay.
Member Julie Hoy?
Nay.
Member Nordyke?
Aye.
Member Varney?
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy?
Aye.
Member Dixon?
Aye.
Member Curtis?
Aye.
Member Chirac?
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown?
Aye.
Chair Stapleton?
Aye. And recorder, could you please give us the final count on that?
3 nays
Thank you.
and 1 absent. So
And
we
one
passed.
absent. Okay. So the motion passes.
I have a
Thank you
side-
so
yes.
much. It's hard to keep track of all of them flying around. All right. So, Mr. Eggleston, we are to our natural environment stewardship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Natural Environment Stewardship has a total result area of $24.9 million with 104.97 FTE. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff? Seeing none, Vice Chair Brown, do I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move with approval, City of Salem's fiscal year 2024 Natural Environment Stewardship Result Area Budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Phillips. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Aye.
Member Cohen's absent. Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Nay.
Member Nordyke.
Aye.
Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Chirac.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Chair Stapleton.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. Josh, we are to a safe and healthy community.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The total for the result area is $158.3 million with 568.67 FTE. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to staff? Yes, Member Allen.
This is probably covered in your erratas. That says 568 and the handout says 287. That's just a big difference. Oh wait, it's safe and, am I looking at the right one? Oh, safe and healthy. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. You shouldn't have the word safe in more than one results area.
Safety first, safety first.
Thank you. Okay. See no questions. Vice Chair Brown, do we have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move with approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2024 Safe and Healthy Community Results Area Budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Nordyke. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Oh, yeah.
Aye.
There we go.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Nordyke.
Aye.
Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Chirac.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Chair Stapleton.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. Josh, we are to a safe and reliable infrastructure and capital improvements. Take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The total for the result area is $154.5 million with 287.02 FTE. And then the construction fund total is $224.4 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, Vice Chair Brown, do you have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move with approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2024 Safe, Reliable, and Efficient Infrastructure Result Area and Capital Improvement Budgets. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh,
I wanted
my
to.
gosh.
I was like,
That was awesome. I'm going to give it to Milton. 'Cause
Nice.
he's not here all the time.
Folks on their A game tonight.
Fantastic. Any discussion? Seeing none, recorder, please call the roll.
Member Milton.
aye.
Member Cohen's absent. Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Nordyke.
Aye.
Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Chirac.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Chair Stapleton.
Aye, motion passes. All right, Josh, a strong and diverse economy.
Thank you. The total for this result area is $14.4 million with 33.99 FTE. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, Vice Chair Brown.
Madam Chair, I move with approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2024 Strong and Diverse Economy Result Area. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, Phillips.
He's ready.
He's on it. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton.
Aye.
Member Cohen's absent. Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Phillips.
Aye.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Nordyke. Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy.
Aye.
Member Dixon?
Aye.
Member Curtis?
Aye.
Member Chirac?
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown?
Aye.
Chair Stapleton?
Aye, motion passes. All right, lastly, we got a welcoming and livable community.
Thank you for this result, Chair. We have $51.9 million, with 153 FTE. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Yes, Member Hoy.
Just so I don't have to look in the big book, how much of that is library?
Ooh,
About $6 million.
okay, thank you. I know, he just has all of that in his brain. It's amazing. All right, seeing no other questions, Vice Chair Brown.
Yes, Madam Chair. I move for the approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2024 welcoming and livable resort area. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tigan.
Oh.
This is great. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the recorder please call the roll?
Member Milton?
Aye.
Member Cohen's absent. Member Allen?
Aye.
Member Tigan?
Aye.
Member Vera Brandel?
Aye.
Member Nishioka?
Aye.
Member Phillips?
Aye.
Member Gwen?
Nay.
Member Gonzalez?
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy?
Aye.
Member Nordyke?
Aye.
Member Varney?
Aye.
Member Chris Hoy?
Aye.
Member Dixon?
Aye.
Member Curtis?
Aye.
Member Chirac?
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown?
Aye.
Chair Stapleton?
Aye, motion passes. Everybody can take a deep breath? Okay. Nobody else has signed up for public comment, but before we leave, I would like to give a special thank you to our fearless leader, Josh. You've done a fantastic job. And because I function on a first name basis, I'm going to do some first names here. Kelly, Callie, James, Ryan, Alan, Tammy, and Jim. All of you were responding to our questions, and with such care. You were feeding us every week, and were just so entirely helpful in all of the ways that you presented sections of this. And some of these members are not here tonight. They were the ones who were helping with the CIP process and answering all of those questions. So a big thank you to staff. We really appreciate you and all that you do. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and helping us through this really important process. Oh, we got a question.
It's not a question, Madam
Okay.
Chair. I just wanted to thank all of the members of the Budget Committee and staff who've been incredibly patient and informative and really helped me through my first session on the Budget Committee. It's been a great experience, and thank you.
Yes, I think you speak on behalf of all new members. I think they're all nodding their heads yes. And thank just the staff, really outstanding job. I couldn't ask for better. We are adjourned.